They were capable of doing it because they went to Congress and they paid off the politicians. They bribed the politicians. Oh, bribery doesn't happen. Hey, we'll talk about Jack Abramoff. I'm going to try to get Jack on this phone because the guy said blatantly that he personally had paid off half of Congress, and then you never heard from him ever again because he was blowing the whistle. He was blowing the whistle. And that's what this show is about. We're going to be blowing the whistle, opening your eyes to the truth. I don't have a boss, folks. No one's going to threaten to cancel my show. I'm broadcasting from all over the world to all over the world. Who knows where I'm going to be? I'm going to be taking your calls. Call 888.
More Uncensored Radio is next.
10, 15, 20 years ago, think about a time when Americans bought things with cash. I remember when I grew up back in the 60s, my parents said, we're going to buy a TV, so we're going to cut back, we're going to tighten our belts, we're going to save our pennies until we have enough money to go to the shop and give that money to the shopkeeper and exchange it for a television. It's called purchasing with cash. It's called waiting to purchase an item until you have the cash to pay for it. And my parents said very simply, something you'll never hear today, if you can't pay for it in cash, that means you can't afford it. That was the America since the beginning of time. And then something changed, and I'll tell you exactly what changed, and I know because I was in the meeting when it changed. I was there, off the coast of Barbados. I was the evil guy who wrote credit card sales letters. The credit card offers you got in the mail, many of those were written by me. Oh, and paid handsomely I was because I was told that the banks back then, here's what happened. This is the evil that occurred. What occurred was the banks said, look, for years they were called interest usury laws. If a bank charged over a certain amount of interest on money lent, you were a loan shark. The mobsters would call them Shylocks. You were a gangster. You were charging usury interest. It was an interest rate so high that the person can virtually never in their lifetime pay it back. And you know what that interest rate was? It varied from state to state. But in Massachusetts at the time, it was 20.74 interest rate. Now go and check out your credit card statement, by the way, and check out what your interest rate is. Do you realize that some people listening to this show right now have an interest rate on their credit card of close to 40% annual percentage rate? Oh, surprising but true. See, years ago, you were a Shylock. You were a loan shark. You were basically loaning money and making that person an indentured servant because you were charging such a high interest rate that that person for the rest of their life would never pay back the loan and they'd be an indentured servant to you. You just basically reinstituted slavery in America. And here's what happened. The banks wanted to make more money. And so the way the payoffs and bribes work in Washington, and you will hear a word on this show, and I have been there and I know it, I've seen the briefcases full of cash handed to the politicians or to the politicians' political action committees or to the politicians' sons or daughters or relatives in the form of no-show jobs. Yes, bribery is alive and well in Washington. Some people forget that there was a lobbyist named Jack Abramoff who blew the whistle on this, just like Valachi did when he blew the whistle on the mafia. And Abramoff said, and the moment he said that I personally have bribed and paid off over half of members of the United States Congress. You never heard that story ever again. It was shut up, done, over with. Jack Abramoff never is talked about ever again. No one even talks of it. They won't even mention his name because he blew the whistle on what really goes on in Washington. So the bankers the bankers went and paid off the lobbyists, and I'll explain that to you later of how the payoffs work, and I've been there. I know firsthand. And by the way, I always tell people this. If you hear that I committed suicide, trust me, it ain't no suicide. And people say, well, why are you doing this? Aren't you, you're risking your life blowing the whistle on the Washington politicians. Someone has to tell the truth because we are past the point. We're past a certain point where it's out of control now. And Americans need to take their country back. You need to be informed. You need to know not just what the scene is, but you need to know what to do about it. And there are some very simple steps that you can do, and we can change this country. You can change your life. You can change your health if you just know what to do. Because the key is this. Each and every single person has the power to change everything in this country because it's not based on who you vote for. You think that's how it is. No. It's based on what you buy with your money. That's how the world works. If you change your buying habits, everything will change. I'll tell you more about that later. So the bankers paid off the politicians, and so the politicians passed a law that never made the news. And the law said the banks, for credit cards, no longer have any cap on interest. Are you kidding me? They also said that the banks, the credit card companies, can charge fees, late fees, over limit fees, monthly maintenance fees, activation fees, telephone inbound call fees, annual fees, review of account fees. You can make up any fee you want and charge the customer. And when you add in all the fees, the interest rate goes up to sometimes 100% or more. And the banks came to me and said, KT, we've just been given a license to steal, and it's legal. Congress has just said to us, the credit card companies, you can now be in the wallet of the United States citizen, taking out money anytime you want for the rest of their life. And if you call in to a radio show and bring this up, they will kick you off if they even take your phone call because they don't want to talk about it. We keep hearing that the housing crisis is causing the recession. Lies, BS, and more lies. The truth is never talked about. It's the banks and the credit card companies. And this is how it started. The banks wanted to make more money. They paid off the politicians to pass a secret law. The secret law allows credit card companies to avoid usury interest rate laws, which means they could charge any interest rate they wanted, number one, and they could charge any fees they wanted. And when you add in the fees, some people were paying 150% interest rates. I mean, that's the insanity. And if you take your credit card balance and just make the minimum monthly payments, if you had a $5,000 balance, you virtually would never pay it off in your lifetime. That's the problem. So the banks came to me. We sat off the coast of Barbados, and they said, KT, the government, and listen, this is no secret. Look, we paid off who we had to pay off. We're going to continue to pay off who we need to pay off in continued payments. This is our honest politician. Someone says, Kevin, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? Well, first off, I'm a convicted felon, so I can't vote. So it doesn't really matter. But who's better, the Republicans or the Democrats? My friend Charlie Jones always said, I'm a Republican. I said, why, Charlie? He goes, because Democrats lie. I go, they do? What about Republicans? He says, well, Republicans lie too, but I like Republican lies better than Democrat lies. And listen, forget Republicans, Independents, Democrats, Libertarians. They're all politicians. There's only one political party. It's called politician. There's only one political party, politician. And when you are a politician, you're elected, you only have one objective. You are no longer representing your country. You're no longer representing your state. You're not representing your district. You're not representing the citizens. And you're not really representing the party you belong to. You're representing all politicians. And every law you pass is designed to keep the existing politicians in power. That's what it's all about. Back to the economy and back to the recession. The housing crisis did not cause the recession. The recession and the economic problem is causing the housing crisis. It started with the banks and the credit card companies getting Congress to pass the laws. They passed the laws giving them a license to steal. They came to me and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send out these credit card offers to anybody who wants one. And we'll give a credit card to anybody who wants it. They don't have to prove they have a job. See, remember this? Remember you used to get these credit card offers? I got one sent one time to my dog, Princess Trudeau. She can get a credit card. I mean, 2-year-old kids were getting offers in the mail. Dead people were getting offers sent in the mail. Anybody could get. All you had to do is sign it. Just sign it. You didn't have to prove you had a job. You didn't have to show your income. You didn't have to show your overheads, your expenses. It didn't matter. And this is the problem. The banks didn't care because they were looking for paper profits so that the stock price would go up. Therefore, they could sell their stock and make a killing. And then 10 years later, the next guy would have a problem to deal with. This was the scam set up. And how do you know? Because I was in on it. I was there. I went to the pay window. I mean, I know exactly. My friends did too. money, yachts, planes. It was, I mean, someone says, is it criminal? No. They gave the banks and credit card companies a license to steal. The government sold you out. Politicians are not protecting the citizens. They're protecting the profits of the big companies. That's what happened. So everybody got 1, 2, 5, 10 credit cards, and the banks didn't care. The banks knew that if you maxed out your credit cards based on your income, and if you were just making the minimum monthly payments, that you would not be able to make the minimum monthly payments. And what happened is Joe Smith, the average American, went out there and started buying everything instead of with cash on credit. And the more they bought, the economy did well. And the more they bought, the economy continued to do well. And the more they bought, the economy continued to do well. And when the economy did well, people would hire more, gave bonuses out, increased salaries. And when you were one of those people who got a little increase in salary and your company's hiring more and more, you went out and bought a big house. And the banks for the housing now said the same thing. We're going to loan money to anybody who asks. It doesn't matter if they can even afford to pay back the mortgage. And the banks said, we're going to give you a mortgage, an adjustable rate mortgage. So for the first 3 years, your payment's going to be $2,000. But they didn't tell you that after that, the payment's going to be $4,000. That was the problem. And then, because the person said, well, if I can't afford to make the payments, I'll just sell the house. But they bought the house for $200,000. And a few years later, the house was only worth $160,000 and their mortgage was $190,000. So they couldn't sell the house because they were upside down. They owed more than the house was worth. And that caused a big problem. But it started with the credit card companies. That's where it started. And that's what nobody's talking about. The fact today is over half of Americans, over half of American citizens, when you get your paycheck, 90% of that paycheck goes to pay just fixed expenses. The minimum monthly payments on your credit card, your mortgage, your insurance, the basic food for your house, the light bill, just the basics. We have so much overhead. Your cell phone, your cable, these are overheads that didn't exist years ago. All of the credit card company minimum monthly balances that didn't exist years ago. So the problem is the credit card companies whacked this all up. They loaned us all this money to keep the economy growing in a fictitious, fake way. And now we have a big, huge problem. And this problem is not going to get better over the next 2 to 5 years. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. In the next 2 to 5 years, 75% of the people listening are going to have either a reduction in their paycheck, either lose your job, or go from full-time to part-time. Do you know that that two things were passed in this secret law by the criminals in Washington? Our federal senators, state senators, and our congressmen. And the reason I say they are criminals, because whether they're Democrats or Republicans or independents or libertarians, whatever, we don't have anybody else except Republicans and Democrats in Congress right now. I think there's one independent. But they're all Democrats or Republicans. It doesn't matter. They're all politicians. And they all are together. They all sit together. And they all make rules to make sure they stay in power. That's how government works all around the world. Once you're in power, and once you are allowed to make the rules, you exempt yourself from most laws, and you design all the rules so that you benefit as a congressman or a senator or a politician, and that you stay in power forever, which is why 95% of all politicians get reelected. Very few get knocked out by a brand new person. They're always reelecting themselves. Why? Because they set up the rules so that they can get reelected, and the new guy coming in has no chance. Okay? So the politicians got paid off by the banks, and in this secret law, they passed two things. The first thing they said is, here's the law that they signed and the president signed. The first rule is the credit card companies now can charge any interest rate they want. Any interest rate they want. No more usury interest. They can charge 40% annual percentage rate. They can make the card holder an indentured servant, a slave, for the rest of his human life. And the guy goes to work just to pay off the interest to the criminal bankers. Okay? So the first thing they said is they can raise the interest rates to any amount they want. And the second thing they said is you can charge any fees you want for any purpose, any kind of fees, and a activation fee, a credit review fee, an over-limit fee, a non-activity fee. I've seen these. And the reason is I also wrote some of these fees. We're sitting around thinking of what fees can we make up, what names. How about a telephone review fee? Monthly maintenance fee. What the hell is a monthly maintenance fee for a credit card? What are they maintaining? Maintenance? Oh, they're going to oil the credit card? What are you talking about? A maintenance fee for... And by the way, I'm very proud of that one. Thank you very much. It's everywhere, isn't it? Yes, you can thank me for the monthly maintenance fee. And here's the kicker. Any interest rate you want, any fees you want, but here is the beautiful one. The Congress said, for the first time in the history of America, we're going to allow the credit card companies to enter into a contract with the customer and then state this contract with all these terms and conditions. We can change them anytime we want. We don't have to tell you. I'm serious. No one ever reads their credit card contract. Your credit card contract says, these are the terms and conditions. And then there's one line in there that says, and we can change the interest rate, we can change the fees, we can charge you anything we want, anytime we want, and we can change any term or condition of this contract anytime we want, and we don't even have to tell you. We laughed like idiots because we just got the bankers, the credit card companies, and I was there. We got a license to steal. Jesse James couldn't do it better with a gun. They gave us the keys to your bank account. The credit card companies basically now could take money out of your bank account anytime they wanted to. And it's the only contract in the history of America that's allowed to have that clause where the terms can be changed anytime, for any reason, for any purpose. And they don't even have to tell you. That's why we are economically screwed for the first time in the history of America. Half of Americans are maxed out on credit cards, are massively in debt. Do you realize that more Americans have more debt than ever before in our history? Which means when you get your paycheck, you have to pay a certain percentage of that to make the minimum monthly payments on your credit cards, on your car loan, on your mortgage, on your student loan, on your gas card credit bills, on your department store credit card bills. There's never been a time in history where an American citizen has to pay such a high percentage of their paycheck just to make the minimum monthly payments on their debt. That's why we're screwed, because now you can't go out and buy a new blank to stimulate the economy. You're using your paycheck just to pay off debt. That's the problem. And then the mortgage crisis, the housing crisis, was because of that problem. Now, when your mortgage payment went up because you bought a variable rate mortgage, and the bankers didn't tell you that the payments are going to go higher, or you figured out by the time they go higher, I'll just flip it and sell it. Now you can't make the payments, and you're going to get foreclosed on. The economy is worse than anyone is talking about, but nobody's talking about the reason. The reason is very simple. The American citizens were basically given credit cards and told by the banks, take the card, take the card, take the card, take the card. And it wasn't necessarily greed or stupidity, but the fact is, in the old days, when an American citizen would want to borrow money, he would go to a bank and sit down with his banker. And his banker would say, show me all of your expenses. What do you spend each and every month? How many people are in your family? What type of commitments have you made? Do you have rent or a mortgage? Do you have a car payment? What are your monthly insurance bills? How much do you spend on food? Do you have any student loans? And they would go through expenses, and they would go through the income of the person. They would review his credit to see in the past when he borrowed money, did he pay it back on time? And they would look at the guy's salary and job and say, how long have you been working for this company? And what's the likelihood that you're going to continue to work for this company for the next 2 to 5 years? They would call the employer. They would find out what is the likelihood of this guy staying on the job. And the banker would say, you can't afford a loan. Denied. You can't borrow money because you'll never pay it back. The chances of you pay it back are slim. Your job is too weak. You have too much debt. You have too many young kids. That means you could have medical problems. And the banker would look at all these factors and say, we're not going to loan you any money. And that changed. That changed when the credit card company said, we'll just give a credit card to anybody. And the mortgage company said, we'll give a mortgage to anybody. It doesn't matter, because when the mortgage is on the corporation's books, it looks like profit for the next 2 to 5 years. And the stock of those companies, the banks and the mortgage companies and the consumer lending industry, the stock went crazy. And the executives, the guys who paid off the politicians to write these laws, made, listen to me, they made not millions, not billions. They made trillions of dollars when they sold their stock in those companies. And they knew that the day would come when everything would become crashing down. They knew that today would come. And guess what? You're not going to believe this. You think the guys on Wall Street are hurting. Are you kidding me? The guys who sold out Guess what they did? They went and they bought stock in Citibank, and they shorted the stock, which meant they were betting that it would go down. They knew it was going to go down. They were the insider that built it up, and they knew it was going to come crashing. Citibank, the stock is down 95% in the last year. And guess what? I know guys who have just bought $250 million yachts and paid cash on the money that they made when they shorted Citi. And these are the same guys who made the money when the stock went up to 95. They are basically laughing at every American citizen. They're laughing at you. And how have those guys been capable of doing that? It's 100% legal. They were capable of doing it because they went to Congress and they paid off the politicians. They bribed the politicians. Oh, bribery doesn't happen.